Welcome back. Today we are going to take a look at the Binary Dynaquattro. So before we begin, I do want to thank HiFiGo for making this one available on a US tour. You get more reviews, more impressions, all of that is good. So I do want to thank HiFiGo for making these sets available in that process. But this is what it looks like up close. I'm sure you have seen lots of pictures of the faceplate. On the back side, you can kind of get, if you have a bright enough light, maybe you can get a good shot of all three dynamic drivers. There is a fourth passive in there, which I'm not sure where it is. Maybe it's in that corner, but yeah, so there's about all three drivers, three dynamic drivers. This is the modular cable that it comes with. This is the box that it comes with, and we won't spend too much time with that. We will kind of jump into it there. So what is it? Like I was just talking about, it is a 10 millimeter dynamic driver. There is an 8 millimeter dynamic driver. There is a 6.8 millimeter dynamic driver, and something they call the 6 millimeter passive diaphragm. So maybe that's a passive radiator. Maybe that's just their terminology, but they call it a passive diaphragm. Either way, that is what the graph looks like. And just looking at the graph, there is a lot of bass. There is kind of a mid bump there to get the upper mids kind of in front of the bass. And there's a treble, which kind of looks pretty normal, very smooth, kind of end-to-end, very smooth style signature, very smooth tuning, and that's kind of the way it comes across. But I would say it very much is a preference set. It's those of you who want more bass, less treble, and mids are kind of pushed forward in front of the bass. And that's kind of what I just talked about. This is a pretty steep bass curve. That's probably 72. Anytime you get above 70, above 10 dB, you're probably talking about quite a bit of bass. This one has quite a bit of mid bass at the same time. The mids are kind of popped forward to get in front of this, and the treble is kind of dipped just a little bit just to give you a more bassy, more natural sound, so nothing sounds out of place, and that's sort of the end-to-end version of that. So it is for people who want a lot of this kind of in front, not recessed, and then this kind of not going to fatigue you or be in the way anyway in that format. So I think it does sound like a bass-heavy dynamic driver set. Hard to pin as a hybrid with all the extra bass. I mean, it's got three drivers in it, and because there is a lot of bass, it tends to not let the other two drivers shine as much. So yeah, it kind of sounds like a hybrid, but it's kind of hard to also pin down as a hybrid if you just listen to it. And I do think that Binary did a really good job of making three dynamic drivers sound cohesive with this bass-heavy, timbre-focused style tuning. Definitely more bass, less treble is perhaps better for rap and R&B because you have the vocals to balance with that, and those are kind of pushed in front, and I think that kind of sounds fine. But for something like electronic dance music, it's kind of missing the tight bass. I think this is a lot of sub bass, and it tends to soften the sounds. That's quite a bit of mid bass as well, and the two together tend to soften up EDM in that way. It sounds quite boomy, but for me, that's just kind of my preference. I prefer a tighter bass and a more energetic upper range for EDM. But any genre that really requires balanced tuning, it's going to be really hit or miss because you've got a really heavy bottom end here, and then the top end sort of covered by the bass. The mids are pushed forward, and this kind of falls behind all that bass. So yeah, if you have genres that require pretty tight balance between bass and treble, this one's going to be a little more hit and miss in that area. So bass, I would say this is just another sub bass heavy tuning. That sub bass does persist in the background. The mid bass impact gets kind of washed out, kind of stomped on a little bit, and softened by all that sub bass. And for me, it was just kind of a weird combination of more sub bass and more mid bass where neither sounds clean or tight. It's just kind of the two kind of mix together and blend together and kind of blur together. And it wasn't really my favorite style of a bass shelf, but definitely for fans of boomy style bass. I definitely prefer a tighter, more linear style, kind of a tight and then extended deep. That's kind of the bass that I like. This is more of a just boom. It doesn't really go all that deep because you have this kind of blooming out and this boominess to it. So it definitely sounds kind of fun, but yeah, it's just not my style of bass. It's definitely for people who love that boom. And as I said, for rap and R&B, it tends to work a little bit better. For other genres that require a little bit tighter bass or sub bass extension that goes back a little bit linearly to get that depth, it doesn't quite do that. It just kind of booms out at you. So the mids, and again, I'll say, fortunately, there is another driver handling the mids, so they do pop in front of the bass, but really a missed opportunity to shine here. I think tonality and timbre are presented quite well, while the dynamics and the separation and the layering, all the technical bits are kind of swirled around in the bass, and everything gets kind of mixed together and not quite as sharp. You don't have all that separation that you're kind of expecting to get from a hybrid. And you combine that with a dynamic driver, softer presentation, the softer treble, and this more than other sets really needed a clean background to shine rather than forcing it forward as they did right there. Yeah, it's kind of the mids are kind of strange because they're still popped forward, and you can tell that they sort of intentionally pop them forward in front of all of the bass. And it's like, well, if they just tweaked the bass slightly, they wouldn't have had to pop them forward, and the whole thing would have sounded a little bit more natural and a better presentation. It's again, it's just not one of my favorite styles of sets. But treble, I will say that treble is by far the third player here, very much from the timbre focused playbook. Just enough to cover, just enough to extend, no fatigue, no sibilance, no peaks, and to sound end-to-end consistent, and I think they actually pulled that off quite well. But on the flip side, the bass really swallows the treble, and the whole thing, and the whole sound tends to shrink inward inside your head because the bass is so heavy, and it really masks a lot of the upper treble. It doesn't really project out in the way it should, even though you look at the graph and it looks like it extends quite well. It really gets swallowed up by all of that sub bass, and the whole thing kind of pulls inward inside of your head into a very intimate, overlapping stage. And so and when you talk about stages, right in the first minute, I sort of knew this wasn't going to be a stage set. For people who are very sensitive to stage or stage aware, yeah, this one is very much in the middle of your head. The bass is kind of here, and then you get everything that's not bass is sort of popped right in front of it. So you kind of get this flat, overlapped area in front of the bass, and everything is overlapping and inside of your head, and it's just not a stage person style set, and it's sort of, it becomes very hard to listen to because everything's kind of overlapping and there's no space to it. It feels kind of claustrophobic to me. So that is what I got on the Dynaquattro. So thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.